Okay, so I will start with a question. I guess at this conference, most people would know about the tradition of social and community cooperatives. Who knows about social community cooperatives? Most people. And I heard someone's from Italy, so the Italian tradition of social and community cooperatives, who is aware of that? Also, quite a few. And who knows the name of Franco Basaglia? Les? Okay, so this might be an interesting then talk, because I'm an economist as well, but I do field research, which I think is a very important methodology, and I would like to focus a little bit on that today and what can be drawn from that with reference to the social and community cooperatives that evolved in Italy. And so I'm looking at it from an evolutionary perspective, and so I. I'm Jerome, I should say. So basically, I would try to keep my comments short and focus on the story. So Italy, of course, has three main traditions or histories of cooperatives. There's the Catholic social movement, so to speak, the socialist, communist background, and then there's also kind of a liberal democratic kind of tradition as well. But ever since the war, and the same as in Germany and many other countries, there was a transfer. The Second World War I'm talking about now. There was a transformation in the economy. You talk in Germany about the Wirtschaftswunder, and of course you have a similar event in Italy where there's modernization and basically the ways of life that have existed for thousands of years change in a matter of decades. I say here, globalization, neoliberalism, the entry of women into the workforce. I'm not saying that that's also negative, so to speak, that women enter the workforce, but these are just fundamental changes. The exposure to the world, the global economy, the retreat of the state away from providing services, and again, the fact that women are entering the workforce means that someone has to take care of the children, the elderly, because reproductive labor we relied on, or was relied on for some time as an assumption. And of course, these changes have also affected the cooperative sector. And so just a very brief overview of the literature that influences me, I just categorize them into, I guess this is 4 different ones. Looking at evolution, people like Charles Darwin, I think are very important, Eleanor Ostrom as well, Edward O. Wilson and David Sloan Wilson talking about multi-level selection, and the pro-social methods, I guess, that are an application of an attempt to advance Eleanor Ostrom's core principles for managing commons. The political theory of the firm, we have people like Isabel Ferreras, with whom I work in Belgium at the Royal Academy, Gregory Dow, who looks at labor-managed firms, and David Ellerman, who has a neo-abolitionist, what he calls the neo-abolitionist stance about the firm, particularly with reference to workers. Relational economics and rather new development with Josef Wieland here in Germany. We have Lucio Biggiero, with whom I just was in Brussels until today, and also looking at graph and network theory with people like Judea Pearl, talking about causal inference, and my friend and colleague Bob Milanovic, who I will return to. And so the theory I would like to tell the story with is Tinbergen's 4 questions. So Tinbergen wrote this essay in 1963 on ethology and developed these basic 4 questions to talk about the evolution of systems, organisms, basically, that are based on first the function, the history, the mechanism, and the development of certain traits. And so I would talk about the function, the mechanism, the history, and development of the social cooperatives. So the function of these, of course, as most of you know, since most of you know them, self-organization, providing, for instance, mental health services, or on the other hand, integrating marginalized communities into the economy. I would say it also has a function in practice of shifting from what economists call the principal-agent model, where perhaps I hire a laborer to do something for me. I own a machine, but I'm too lazy, or I'm wealthy, so you do it for me. I'll pay you a wage. The principal-agent model, away from that to a model of shared agency, where there's a need to deliberate, communicate, coordinate, and so on continually, informally as well. And basically, at the same time, the function is to facilitate building of community and economic empowerment by creating a formal legal construct in which municipalities, citizens, patients, and others can organize. The history, again, I mentioned this great transformation where things changed almost overnight in this country. And again, going back to Franco Basaglia, was in fact a lot of this inertia, I would say, in the case of Italy, occurred in the psychiatric system, which was also changing. As Foote mentions, there's a great book by Foote called The Man Who Closed the Asylums, about Franco Basaglia. It's rather recent by Verso Books. And Basaglia, of course, was influenced by the anti-fascist movement in Italy, coming from Venice, and he took these experiences with him on his path to becoming a psychiatrist. And his first job was to lead a very dilapidated psychiatric institution at the margins of Italy, in Gorizia. Literally, the boundary between Italy and Yugoslavia ran through the asylum, so it's literally on the periphery. Nobody cared about it. It was derelict. There were horrible conditions there. The patients were barely surviving, barely alive, as he commented in his journals. And through his experiences there, which started basically from the first day, I mean, I could tell you lots of stories where he refused to sign the conditions, medications and various things for the patients, because he wanted to first assess and speak with and know the patients. So he developed what was called a Basaglian canon, which resulted in the global bestseller, The Negated Institution, which, the 68 movement was inspired by, as well as Herbert Marcuse here in Frankfurt, in addition. So there were a lot of social movements, even a political party, the Radical Party, on the streets campaigning as more attention was drawn to the injustice of these asylums, to closing them and changing the system. And there were some, I'm really cutting the story short, some fascinating events and innovations where the Italian Senate was pushed to really change this law very quickly, because they realized there would be an initiative if they did not react, and then there would be nothing to replace them. So they did a lot of deliberation in a very quick way to craft this Legge 180, the Law 180, which is the Legge Basaglia, the Basaglia law, and I think it was 1978, 78, and perhaps, and which promulgated the closure of these institutions, mental asylums. But it was not until 1991, with the passage of the Law 381, that they ultimately were closed through the creation, ultimately, of the social cooperatives. So you had to find an institution to transition towards, and that institution was found in these traditions of cooperatives, which Basaglia was also inspired by. So the mechanism is that legally you have two types, type A and type B. Type A restricts the activity, and B restricts the stakeholders that are involved. So type A can be basically a mental health provision, includes these kind of work integration services. That's the type A. No, I'm sorry, that would be the type B. The type B would be rather for people who are marginalized, migrants, mental health patients, youth, and others who can do anything. They can be, computer scientists. They can be trained to. There's a great film, Si Può Fare, where these patients learn how to make mosaics, floor panels, actually. And type A would be again, we're providing services to people in particular need. So. And again, a mechanism seen more broadly is that it provides a place for individuals to congregate. That's, I would say, the legal mechanism. And the interesting thing about the development is that very soon after you have these, which again, it began as a way to change the mental health status quo, but very soon people started reading the law and applying it in very different contexts. So I say mutations appeared. And the first of these that is recorded is the Valle de Cavilieri in the middle of the woods in Emilia-Romagna, which was a community that was dying. People were moving away, young people were moving away, there were no jobs, and people basically gathered to create a hotel, restaurant, to increase tourism. in the manner of a community, a social cooperative. I think in this case it was a type A, no, type B, it's type B. And restricted to the residents. And this was to revitalize. And from this, really, you saw an interest growing through people like Poletti, do I say here? No. Giuseppe Poletti, who was the Italian Minister of Labor, 2014 to 2018. I met him at one point, very passionate guy and a visionary. And he started to promote this idea, not of social cooperatives, but of community cooperatives as a way of regenerating communities. So from the transition of the closure of the asylums towards the creation of these cooperatives for regenerating communities, there was some time. And again, they were informal institutions until 2014. And you had in Pinata, which is a small community in the south of Italy, in Puglia. I visited them. Basically, an attempt to build a solar park, gigawatt, whatever solar panel farm. You've seen them in India and other places. And the residents organized against this effort, which they suggested would destroy the beauty of their medieval village, which is quite beautiful. And basically, they about 70 of these people organized in opposition. They gathered together with the cooperative federation Lega Coop, and basically started a service cooperative to produce electricity on their roofs, which are flat. So, you don't see them. And they secured a loan from a local bank, and through Lega Coop were able to craft a regional law at the level of Puglia to basically sanction this new type of cooperative that had already existed before as a kind of a mutation as a community cooperative, a cooperativa di comunità, they call it. So you had this law, the 23rd law, 2014 of Puglia, to sanction this, and I don't have time to go into the details. You can read the law or read my dissertation. But of course, this has since evolved. They started again with power, electricity, and they have increased their services to after-school care, providing certain things like medicines to senior citizens. They purify water locally and provide, you bring a reusable bottle and you can, the Casa de Agua, they call them. And so many other groups were inspired by this project. So you have basically a virus, a good virus that is spreading. I use the term social epidemiology from these origins. And so I just put this in the slide after the last talk about resilience here. And this is, there's a second leg, regenerative economics. There's a group that has developed a number of principles of how to measure regeneration of communities, for instance. And one of the main points, I just put this in the picture, is that the focus on efficiency is a problem over the long term for communities. Of course, in economics, that's all you talk about. And the firm is efficient, it's optimizing, but it creates brittleness because when situations and contexts change, an efficient organism or institution is not able to adapt. So the point that the Research Alliance for Regenerative Economics with Brian Fatt and others have published this very fascinating paper some years ago. They talk about the balance between resilience or redundancy or robustness and efficiency. So good organizations are somewhere in the middle. The point, of course, that I'm getting at is that, again, these are the different principles. And I'm just, what? 5 minutes. Okay, I'll try to hurry. So I just wanted to focus on one of these principles, 8, which is a measure of the level of mutualistic relationships. And just showing, this is just a story I told you in a graphic, basically. This is the counterfactual. So you have a big bank that gives a big loan to a big company to build a big farm of solar panels that citizens are buying electricity and the company pays taxes to the government and so on. So these are the kind of flows that you see from this project. And I just took an average cost of one of these wind parks of an average size. So the point is that what they did here, they created this community cooperative based on these 70 people who were innovating, and they have all the same things. So they have the loan and the interest and the taxes and the revenues and the electricity, but they break all these other flows, which is the mutual aid, the reciprocity. They have new members, so more than 10% of the village, and it's increased their members of the cooperative. They have new services, so the propensity, that's, I didn't have time to go into this from Copa, is the new law, which then generates new, again, interest in this concept, as well as the interactions between Lega Co-op and the government. So the point is, you have much more mutualistic relationships, and still at the same time you have electricity. So basically, this is, I think I'm on a good time. So you have a regenerative evolution or revolution that's occurring, where basically the evolution of the organizations take on new dimensions through processes of basically historical processes and selection amongst members of the community based on the limited resources that they have. And the viability focus, of course, it shifts the focus to a balance between, again, the need for efficiency and the need for some kind of a diversity of different types, and which I think is important in the midst of the fact that the world is changing. And so, again, cooperation among citizens and amongst these kinds of groups is a fascinating thing. I discussed the bankruptcy of a cooperative of Montlhégon as one example. Anyway, I don't have time to go into that in my paper. So the point is that, well, I've said everything here. You have different legal attributes that are locally relevant, and the point, of course, is that you have a sense of shared agency that is happening. And again, it's a different type of valuation, I would say. And just the last thing here, this is a book that I'm editing along with 4 others, Sara Vicari, Lucio Bigiero, Jenny Hübner, and Kemi Ogunieni, sorry. And a chapter in that book that I'm writing together with Bob that I mentioned earlier on basically the way that management scholars and economists can apply ecological methods to study the value that certain organizations are producing. And again, it's a work in progress, as you see here. So we apply the process ecology view in cooperative economics and management. It's a kind of a buffet. It's a menu de degustation. Some people are doing this, others are doing that. So we're even reviewing papers that are just being published right now. So there's a lot of interesting stuff happening. And so I think that just keeping the same old methods of valuation based on double entry bookkeeping and so on are very limited in representing the value that these kinds of organizations bring in society. So I don't know if that was a interesting story, but that's it.
Thank you very much, Hugo.